Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look. All right, welcome everybody to today's Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, and tonight we have Larry Taylor with us, and we're going to talk about a number of things. There's so much news going on that it's kind of hard to know where to even begin. Maybe we should start out with Hillary Clinton is posted as a picture of her on the Drudge Report, and I would urge everybody to go over there and just take a look at that picture and pay special attention to her eyes. Hi, Larry.
Hello, Stuart.
What do we make of this stuff? I mean, here it is right on Drudge Report. Am I seeing things there with her eyes? Or am I actually seeing what looks like serpentine eyes?
Oh, absolutely. I was shocked when I looked there earlier today and I saw that. And then I also saw a report, which, I'm skeptical of, every president that's ever been there, including Bill Clinton, actually, was going to do some disclosure on UFOs. And I saw a report coming out that they're touting the disclosure people to kind of follow Hillary and push for her because she's going to give disclosure to the UFO projects. And I don't know whether that's connected with what's on the Drudge Report, but we're in some very strange and bizarre times.
Oh, boy. I don't even know if that says it well enough. These are... How do we say? The paranormal really is normal now. It's just opened up. And here we have right on the front page of Drudge, which is, I think, the largest news aggregator on the globe. And here she is with her serpentine eyes and talking about Area 51 and opening it up to the public, because we had that opened up to the public, I believe, in Independence Day, if I recall correctly, the movie. Remember that?
Oh, I absolutely do. That, and I don't know if people know it, but they're actually, I believe, about to bring out Independence Day #2, the return. So that might be interesting in the tale. Oh,
they are.
Oh, yeah, they've done an Independence Day 2. They filmed it, and it should be coming out soon. It's called Independence Day, The Return, or I believe is what the title is.
Another arrival? Is that what they're getting at?
Apparently so. It's there's a lot of arrival projects going on. I mean, just they're everywhere, and it continues.
Yeah. Well, I know that, when we went into Iraq, one of the chief areas that we went after was the Iraqi antiquities. And I even have pictures of the troops going into the areas where they would find a lot of that stuff. There's a fellow over in England, and I can't remember his name. He's a doctor, Pella or something like that. And he was claiming that, and maybe you can remember what Stan Deo had to say about it, but on top of the ziggurat was a Stargate. He claimed that's this doctor from England, and he's written a lot of stuff, exopolitics, I think he calls it. And he was talking about that they were really after the Stargate, that they thought it might be buried somewhere, which is very, very interesting in view of the movie Stargate, where they actually dug it up in Egypt. And I do have a picture of what purports to be a real Stargate that they actually did dig it up. It looks all for the world as being real. Of course, it's so easy now to fake anything, you would never know for sure. But where did that movie Stargate come from? And you may recall a crop circle that actually was a Stargate, if you look at it closely.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yes, Spiegel, I believe, was the one who brought that out originally. Spielberg, I mean. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is he was supposedly involved with a number of Black Project folks that told him a lot of secrets. And as a matter of fact, the movie Taken, which we spoke about before, that was such a classic, I mean, an absolute classic, you know, where Spielberg actually interviewed or had interviewed a number of people that was abductees, and he made that just about as close as you could get. And interestingly, Tom Horn, I believe it was his sister, was one of the interview that Spielberg had done about being abducted. And what's so interesting is Spielberg went really closely into the world of not only abductees but the implants. The implants that, you know, remember in the movie where they took one out and it actually began to move and operate, and then everything just literally blew sky high. And
I remember that.
What is so interesting, though, is Dr. Roger Lear, who Richard Shaw has talked to me quite a bit about. Now, Roger Lear's away now. He's dead. But do you know, I don't know if you know it or not, but you know, he withdrew a number of implants out of people, and some of those implants he would, of course, we didn't see it, you know, on a video or anything, but some of those implants literally moved around, and he had to actually track them down and get them out of people. And, you know, Richard Shaw told me, well, about a year ago that a number of the implants, after they actually got them obtained and in a vial or whatever they kept them in, these things not only begin to move, and they begin to change and morph into something else. Now, this goes by so closely with what we saw in the movie Taken by Spielberg. And people don't realize this. People don't realize a lot of what you think is fiction is actually some embedded truth and reality, you know, right in our face.
Yes. When I was working for an OEM down in Texas for a while, and the plant manager there had a brother that worked at Los Alamos. And I was talking to James one day, and we were talking about paranormal stuff and weird stuff. And he said, I'll tell you, my brother works at Los Alamos. And the only comment that he would really make about it was that if the American people knew how advanced, how utterly far advanced we were, they'd shut it down. The American people would just shut it down. It was that spooky.
Yeah.
So,
and you asked me I was going to just mention, you asked me the question about the Stargate, and I know not many people knew it, but I had some contacts that literally sent me photographs and images of the great containers that at the time it was a Blackwater type organization that was there. It wasn't the military. The military was guarding these areas like the ziggurat, but they did go underground and they did bring things up. Artifacts, I suppose, is the tone of what I heard. And they were all logged and placed inside these containers, and of course we know that mostly Blackwater was Black Project activities and mercenary type activities. Where they went, I don't know, and neither did sources, but they did fly. You mentioned in the beginning of the show, you heard that they did that, and they did fly things out. Now, whether one of them was a total Stargate, I don't know, but I'll tell you what, there seems to be a lot of truth out there that people think is fiction, and it's absolutely not. It's some reality going on in our face.
Yeah, I think, X-Files is a good example of TV exposing to the people what's really going on, and of course everybody says, "Oh, it's just fiction, nothing there." In reality, if you watch that series, there's an awful lot of truth, and you can see how the strong delusion is working too. and how these people are being accepted as extraterrestrials and aliens, when of course the Bible and the Book of Enoch would tell us they are fallen angels. Do you remember the book Evil Fire Made to Burn?
Oh, absolutely.
Gary Vay? Well,
yes.
In that book, doesn't he claim that almost all the areas where the super secret stuff is ancient stuff is being dug up, is guarded by by U.S. military just about everywhere, or like you were saying, black ops?
Absolutely, he does. One of the things that he found so intriguing, and he let out in his book, and if you'll remember, Stuart, his book came out, and I got a copy, and I don't remember. I think you got a copy.
Yes, I did. Yep.
But all of a sudden they vanished. They literally vanished. You couldn't get one at Amazon for nothing anymore. They were all gone, and it's just like it never happened. Except we still have a hard copy in our possession. But one of the things that he brought out in his book very closely was, he tied in HAARP and, the activities of that, but he also tied in some paranormal activity, and he tied in, interestingly, a group within the UN, a special group. No matter who was securing these sites all over the world, there was a number of sites, remember, that he said there was this very intricate, some type of ancient language that marked every single one of these sites. I mean, all over the world, even Yemen, and I can't even name all the locations, Australia and the U.S. and all of these, and no matter who was guarding it or what military was being used or what mercenary group or black project group was doing it, there was some interesting people in the UN that was really over the entire project. And, I've often thought these really were the rich men you talk about was behind this part.
Yeah, wasn't it James Hurtak that was the chief of that sort of, I think he still is. He wrote the Keys of Enoch. Yeah, Hurtak.
J.J. Hurtak. That's you're exactly right. And matter of fact, Gary had an interesting meeting with him, and this guy had armed men with him, and they actually took a whole building, a restaurant, out of function, so they'd have the meeting. And Gary said, I was scared to death. He said, this was scary, just meeting this man and the associates. And so there's a lot going on that people don't have a clue.
Well, it's interesting, too, that in the movie Stargate, of course, that was around the pyramid area, and they dig it up, and they bring it to, I think it was Cheyenne Mountain in the movie, where they actually solved the problem, or decoded it, let's say, and it was very interesting to me that they used a fellow by the name of Daniel. And, of course, Daniel the prophet is the decoder of the mysteries of the book of Revelation. So, it's Hollywood borrows an awful lot of this stuff from the Bible, and then they twist it to suit their specific spin on it. And, of course, this is, part of this overall strong delusion, I guess. And I wanted to bring up, as long as we're on this subject of an arrival, basically, you had a dream or a vision of the children being taken?
Oh, I did. Let me mention, let me mention something right here, because it dovetails really what you're saying right now. You mentioned the pyramids, and I mentioned the ziggurat, and of course we all know. I'm assuming everybody listening to us knows what the ziggurat is. Maybe they don't, but the ziggurat in Babylon, ancient Babylon, that they dug down into. Listen, this is what's interesting. And I'm not telling anybody to believe me, but I read it's either in the book. I was doing a study for something that was going on Augusto's radio show, and I did a study, and I looked around, and I found either, I can't remember if it's the Book of Jasher or maybe the Jubilees, but one of those extra books, that they talk about. But it clearly says in there that the so-called ziggurat, or the the tower that Nimrod built and all, it said that there was a great cataclysm came upon it, and this is what was intriguing, because you think, maybe we think that the whole thing was destroyed when the Lord took that place down and changed the languages and people and all this kind of things, but maybe that didn't happen that way. It's either Jubilees or the Book of Jasher. It talks about how the ground. This is how it says it happened, and I'm just paraphrasing. I'm not reading it from the book right this moment, but it said the ground opened up and swallowed 1/3 of this the Tower of Babel or the ziggurat or whatever. If the ground opened and swallowed 1/3 of it, the second third caught on fire and was burned completely, and a great wind came and toppled and destroyed the rest of it down on top of the other. So, that would leave, Stewart, a possibility that 1/3 that was swallowed underground was still underground, and they may have dug down into it, in Iraq. We don't know. So your Stargate theory may really have some reality there, because remember, Standeo said that there was a literal Stargate. He said he saw one on a image of the Tower of Babel, and it looked right at the top like a Stargate sitting there.
Yes. Well, they claim that, here again, we're getting into frequencies. And for people that don't know about it, frequency is nothing more than vibrations. And the Bible says that the entire creation was done by the Word. The Word is frequency, it's vibrations. The Germans, when they were delving deep into the UFO technology and all that, I can't think of his name, Schwarzenberger or something like that, came to the conclusion that everything was vibrational, and that is how, in fact, if I recall right, didn't Hitler have sound weapons? Remember the ad, is it real or is it Memorex? And Ella Fitzgerald would sing and break the glass.
Yes.
And the theory is that when the Israelites marched around the city 7 times, that sound was used to destroy the walls, and they came toppling down. And Hitler was designing sound weapons, which would be, amazingly powerful if they were ever developed. And I did hear a rumor, I don't know why we're getting off into this, but remember Philadelphia?
Yeah.
The riots, and they said that a sound weapon was employed there.
Well, I certainly have heard that we do have some sound weapons and I've heard, now this is again another rumor, but on the back channels, they talked about some sound weapons that we had literally developed before the Iraq War, and they were used in Iraq against the enemy. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure all kind that we've got. We're coming out with lasers now, and so a sound weapon would not be far-fetched at all.
Well, maybe Hillary's advancement of Area 51 and revelations of high technology would be for the world to see and understand that you cannot make war with the beast, that they have all these weapons now that have been developed secretly by taxpayer money, funneled off by black operations, drug use, and all that sort of thing. But trillions of dollars has been spent, obviously, on all these weapons. And, we have the TR-3Bs, these anti-gravitational devices. Remember Dr. Peter Bader at all? That was a long time ago, about 20 years ago. And he said that we didn't have them. The Russians had them. They were called Russian cosmospheres. And they were like a cow magnet looks. They're rounded on both ends. They're long, slender, silver objects, but they could be as much as a mile or even 2 miles long, and they had anti-gravity engines. They could lift anything, and they were being used to transport goods back and forth from the moon and Mars. We had well-established bases on both the moon and Mars. And I'm sure you know about the colorization that NASA does about Mars, making it look
absolutely.
like a dead red planet, when in reality it's got blue skies just like Earth, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, go back. I want to go back into that kind of vision you had about the kids, because you like the movie Knowing, as I do. In fact, I just watched it the other night.
That's an incredible movie. I mean, that's really, really, it's interesting. Very interesting.
Well, in your dream, the kids were taken, right?
That's right.
Or your vision? Can you
Yes,
get into that a little bit?
Sure. I'll just give you a short version. I had this incredible dream, and it was about an arrival of large, and I mean really large craft. And do you remember the craft? You've heard of Mona Lisa? I mean, that's the name of a reported alien that was found in a craft, a massive craft on the moon. And, of course, there's a lot of controversy there, but I know researchers and journalists in other nations that have done incredible work that interviewed some of these people that apparently this Apollo mission was a joint Russian-U.S. mission. And there's a lot of validity, including a lot of photography, about that. And what's so interesting is the craft that they were a little smaller than the one on the moon, because if you remember, the one on the moon, they had an image of it with an Eiffel Tower beside it to show the size of it, and it was absolutely, it would have to be a mother craft of some kind, crashed on the moon. And what's interesting, these other craft, though, were smaller, but in that same shape, basically. They wasn't round. They wasn't flying saucers. The craft I saw in this arrival were just like that shape. And people can go to viewzone.com, viewzone.com, and there's a report there, a real report from Gary Vay about Mona Lisa and the other stuff. But what's interesting was when these began to land, the military was activated, the police were activated, and I was shocked in this. It was a type of a dream vision, I guess. I'm not sure what it was, but it was really, really entailing. What shocked me was the fact that I would go from town to town, it looked like, watching these things, and they would land. Apparently they were anti-gravity because there was no sound, there was no blast, there was no vibration particularly. They were silent. And when they would land, though, what was interesting, a military would surround the town, the police within the community would round up the people, and this is what, and I can't explain it, I can't interpret it, but the children were taken by those that were in those craft. They were herded into the craft. Then the police and the troops that were there, they put the adults in military vehicles and drove them away. And where they went, I don't have a clue. That was about the end of it all. I didn't see the end of what occurred. I didn't even see the craft lift off. But I did see that very, very clearly, and it was so indelible on my spirit that I can remember it clearly.
Well, you remember in the movie Knowing, the UFOs came down and took the kids. The adults were all left behind in that movie. But what was interesting to me was the Lord gives everybody who is saved a white stone. Find that in the book of Revelation. But the children in this movie were all given black stones, which I found rather fascinating. And, of course, as you know, Knowing... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention, you're talking about the colors of the stones. One thing that I remember, you said one time that I absolutely have never forgotten, and it's been years. You talked about a negative universe. You said we live in a negative universe. So if people can look at a negative, white appears black, black appears white. So if we put out in a movie where there are black stones used, if we're dealing on a spiritual level, those black stones are actually white.
Yes, it'd be kind of fascinating to, but where are they getting these things from unless they do know that maybe what you saw in your dream, they already got this all planned out. I mean, the logistics of such an operation that you're describing would be horrific. And they would have they would have to have the police in every town briefed, ready to go. I can't imagine people doing that, letting their own children go on board these things, but who knows? And you said, well, the other people just disappeared. They probably went to their FEMA camp, Camp Joy of Hillary.
Well, you may Camp Joy. That's really good. That's another negative universe word. That's another negative universe word, isn't it?
I think so. But it makes you wonder if we aren't. I really have believed for a long time that our existence here is coded so that we view everything as positive, as you would view a full-color picture. But in reality, it's negative. And if you went out to outer space, which appears black, it's actually white. The stars, which you see as white, are actually black.
You're right. You're exactly right. And this is what's strange. If you just look at it from whether we use the bots or whether we might even use the Torah codes or whether we might even use a spiritual viewpoint, we're at a time in history, literal spiritual history, and of course, you could say prophetic and historical, where actually, literally, right now, black is called white, white is called black, good is evil, evil is good. This has all come to pass, and that would put us in a negative universe again.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can get people to actually acquiesce to the point where the Bible says they literally bow down to Satan and lick his boots. I mean, how do you get a human race to do that without systematic programming over a long, long time? And at the same time, how do you get the people to accept the extraterrestrial alien mythology? And according to the scripture, of course, it is mythology. It is a delusion, if you will, a strong delusion. If you look up the word strong, it means very effectual. In other words, this arrival is going to do exactly what the Lord says he wants it to do. And people, by and large, I'd probably say 95% of the human race are going to accept it, bow down to it. And didn't Stan Deo do some research on this arrival? And he went back in, if I remember, the ancient languages and recoded parts of Daniel.
Yeah.
And what he found out is really, really disturbing. Because these guys that are coming are not going to be very pleasant. Let's put it that way. Have you heard any more from Stan about that?
No, I haven't, other than, he was very passionate. Stan's been quiet a while lately, and he was very passionate about a soon arrival. I mean, he's been warning for the last few years, but he did go back in Daniel. He went back into the ancient languages, and I think some other books too, and did some research that are incredible, and did a really close research of the I guess you could say the Chaldee or the Hebrew wording of the words used to explain this in Daniel, the book of Daniel, and he found that this thing is so right in our face. I mean, right there in the book of Daniel, it's just right up front that this is going to occur, and it's going to occur, he believes, just almost where he said we're right up on it. We're literally right up on it. And that would go along. But have you also, something I found intriguing lately, there's been some really interesting NASA images that are going out like not Yahoo News, places like that, which are really odd. They're showing images on Mars that are very strangely built, talking about they appear to be Sphinx of some kind, which I find this ironic because NASA, you remember when you got your NASA image and talked about something called Tithonia, and they went nuts. I mean, you couldn't have that.
Well, there were step pyramids there, plain as day. There was what looked like I guess you could call it almost a Tesla energy plant there. There was, I used the term manufacturing plant because I couldn't figure out, but you can see it actually literally carved into the side of a hill and then coming out straight out from there, very large. There was a statue there, a couple 100 feet tall, carved into the rock. There were some very round-shaped buildings, which I've also seen pictures on other places on Mars that they've picked out. And, that was Project Red Star. I've still got probably, 900 DVDs left of our first release because nobody wanted it. I don't know if people just didn't believe it and thought it was idiotic or what the deal was. But I remember you called because I was a little nervous about releasing it and said, don't worry about it. It's going to be a non-event.
I remember that.
Remember that?
Now, aren't you, am I wrong, or I remember not too long back you had mentioned, are you working on a new Project Red Star
yes.
Plus working on?
Yes. Yep. And there's much more proof now that Mars was once inhabited. And I'm not exactly sure. You remember that kid in, I think it was Russia? He wasn't very old, but he said he had memories of a civilization on Mars, and that he had been a member of that. Now, you and I would probably think maybe that's a little bit on a demonic side, but whatever, at Dames, did you hear his latest on Coast to Coast?
Oh, I did. Well, I didn't hear it, but I read some of the data, yeah.
Well, he talked about some a civilization on Mars. And I think it's at Dames that also remote viewed a being on Mars, and he said he would never go back. It scared him so much.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that, and it literally scared him so bad that he said, I'll never do that again.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what he saw.
Well, it does, and what's interesting, so-called father, and I'm not promoting remote viewing, by the way, or telling people to do it, but the father of remote viewing, I was trying to remember his name.
I know who you mean.
Yeah. Anyway.
What was his? Swan.
Yeah, Ingo Swann. That's it.
Yes.
Ingo Swann. He actually made a trip for the government. He was taken to what he believed was Mount Weather. He really couldn't tell, but he thought that's where they took him underground, and he was asked to remote view, or in other words, to go view coordinates on the moon. And he did that, and he said there were beings there, and it looked like they were mining something, or there was some underground activity and above-ground activity, and he was viewing that, and he said, this is what's strange. He said, those beings turned and began to look at me, and I wasn't even in my body. In other words, his body was still under Mount Weather, where he was doing this remote viewing. And when he was giving a play-by-play description of what he was seeing to the somebody by the name of, this is what's so strange, by the name of Axelrod. That was the name of the guy that was over the Black Project at the time. Now, whether it's kin to some of the other Axelrods that's in our government, I don't know. But they told him, come away from that place and come away now. And he said those things that he was told when he came back to his cell, that they could literally follow you back to your location, wherever you're located on the planet, and kill you, absolutely kill you. And he said he never went back to the moon again. He's like Ed Dames. There's some of these things we go look I say we, but, they go look at on these other planets. You remember I went to Mars, was taken to Mars by the Lord and shown the nest. And, there was
they saw you too, didn't they?
Oh, they come hunting me. They knew I was there. And I was in my spirit body. And so I'll say this. This is the closest I can liken it, okay? In the spirit realm, there is some way that these beings are demonic beings, whatever they are, they have the ability to track you like a bloodhound. In other words, they can track you, and you said one time, and it may be very true, that they can single in on our DNA, just our DNA itself, and come after us, And so now I don't know how they do it. But it is extremely a dangerous thing to deal with these entities, whatever they are. They're very, very dangerous. And of course, I was under the cover of the Lord, and there's always angelic presence, and so I'm protected. However, a lot of the remote viewers, and I've talked to, some of the intercessors, and I'm talking real prayer warriors, have literally been searched out by remote viewers and have had to actually, pray over these people because, they've come back and had problems, if you know what I'm saying. They literally came back to their body, and they've had incredible spiritual and I guess you could say mental disturbances ever since. And so it's very dangerous to do any of this at all.
Well, it is, and I'm sure you've had the experience where you're doing something and you all of a sudden you know that there's somebody there and they're watching you.
Yes. Not only that, Stuart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there has been instances where someone out there, and I can't say who it is, but someone out there has literally remote viewed, or they actually call it now remote influencing. And you know what that means? That's a good term for not only can they come and view you and watch you, they can literally attack you and can kill you. That's called remote influencing. And they did that towards the end of Ed Dame's activities, and they said this moved on to other projects and that there were similar projects undergoing all the time in China and Russia. So, the more you do activities that get you tied in, you may think nobody knows you're looking into some of these secret things that's going on, and Augusto's had the same things. He's been shown some secret things like the Death Star and a lot of these things, and had those experiences. And then he also has had some problems with people that would do some remote viewing or remote influencing, and he has taught some sessions on how to combat that, and you combat it spiritually. And I'll say again, I'll warn people, don't remote view, don't do these kind of things. You put yourself at great risk doing those, not only from natural attack, because once they know who you are, a black project, a mercenary can just take you out, and all of a sudden you've had this very strange, unusual car wreck, and you're dead. And a lot of people have very strange poisonings and attacks, and they die of lots of heart attacks. Breitbart, Tom Clancy. I mean, people that know things have strange things happen to them, and so. But the thing is, if the Lord takes you, He'll take care of you. In other words, if He, if it's a gift He's given you, and I always say this closely to anybody that's spiritual, if the Lord gives you a gift like that, if it's not Holy Spirit initiated, in other words, if that trip or that experience or that dream or that vision or that revelation is not given to you by the Holy Spirit and it's the director involved during that experience, you could be in trouble because it's a very sensitive thing and you really have to stay under that covering of the Lord.
Yeah, it's kind of like I could remember more than once, but one of the more profound ones, I was in the studio, and I just felt that there was somebody there, really, really there, and probably remote viewing or whatever, but I remember just turning around facing in a direction I thought it was, and I just rebuked it and told it to go away in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, out loud, of course, and it went away. It just vanished.
Yeah.
But that is, so for everybody listening, if you have experiences like that, just rebuke it in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And generally speaking, that will take care of it. But you're right. I think they, if they're developing this remote viewing, I know Ed Dames is sort of out of it now, but I can't imagine the military's not still doing it.
Yeah.
And probably still improving on their ability to do it.
Well, I'll tell you what Ed Dames said, and I got a book of his that was really telling. I mean, it really exposed some things. He said, and of course he didn't say this on radio, but in his book, he said that towards the end of the program that he and others were doing and using, they began with Ingalls Swan's method of remote viewing, and then they began to use technical terms and try to structure it and use, like they were trying to find Russian submarines or, bombers or maybe a nuke or something. They would use coordinates, that might put them in a certain vicinity to look for those things. And so it become more structured. And then all of a sudden, Ed began to talk about, I don't remember the terminology you used, but it was like it was a very teachable, easy way to go out and just hunt things and find things and da-da-da-da-da. But towards the end of the program that he was involved in, he said that and it wouldn't be the military, I don't believe it's probably going to be black project folks that were probably guarded over by rich men, if you know what I'm saying. They began to bring in witches and warlocks and got into all the occult, and it really, really got bad. And he got out of it, and the rest of them pretty much broke up and got out of it. But it had made a turn. What began as just literally supposedly, and Ingalls Swan always says this was a psychic ability, is what he called it. And of course, Ed Dames and the others, they talked about technical remote viewing as a structured way of doing something in the ether or whatever they called it. But Ingalls Swan said, no, you're dealing with a psychic. You're dealing with the psychic realm. And but then it made a dark turn at the end of the project Ed Dames was involved with, and he said it went into the occult and witches and warlocks, and it really got bad. And now that's when it went really black, if we could use that term. And we've never heard anymore. This got very, very secret, but we have had a lot of people with untimely deaths. And, you mentioned one time something shoved you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was walking from the house down to the studio. I'll never forget it. And it was like a force field or something hit me. I think it was Hawk that said he'd had that happen, and I know you've had that happen. But yeah. You don't see anything. You just feel like you're being pushed and shoved, and it almost knocked me over. And
well, that's actually what happened to, you remember Malachi Martin. He said the very same thing, when he was disclosing all of this data on the Art Bell show. He began to have attacks and problems. And then remember, he was literally knocked down and beaten up savagely, and, of course, died, shortly thereafter in the hospital, and had an untimely death. But he said that was invisible. Whatever attacked him, he never saw it.
Yeah, you don't. It's kind of, well, who was it? Casbolt. Remember Casbolt?
Yes, absolutely.
He said that they were trying to hit certain people, but they were very confused because some people apparently were protected and they couldn't hurt them. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't feel it.
Yeah, that's James Casbolt. I remember him well, and he was worried about being killed himself for talking about it. But this is where you get all over actually into super soldiers, or those, changes in things, the DNA, and he got off into that, how they were underground working with super soldiers and putting DNA, which could very well be, what you would call iron and clay type activities.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely believe he's telling the truth because of what Dr. Peter Bader had to say about it. that they were already cloning. That was 20, 25 years ago, that they'd already figured out how to do it. And he claimed, and people probably say, "Oh, ha ha ha," none of that's true. That when you were watching a leader like Obama or somebody else like President Reagan or whoever, you might be watching him, or you might be watching a clone double. And you never quite knew what you were looking at, that they were that far along in DNA research, genetic research. And, of course, anti-gravity to him, as he said 20 years ago, was nothing. They'd already figured that out. And didn't Stan, didn't he work down in Australia with Dr. Edward Teller on anti-gravity?
Yes, he did. Oh, absolutely. And, he's the one that said, when people begin to say, well, there's anti-gravity, or, we don't have any concept of any large craft or putting a large craft up at all. And he said, that's not that hard. And he would explain that, he said, I could put a massive craft in the air. I know how to do it at just certain points where you have the anti-gravity, and it just float along like nobody's business. And he said, people will be fooled. He said, they'll fool you with this one day. And, of course, but he was an insider. I mean, of course, he had fled the U.S., and
yes,
actually was in Australia hiding out when he got connected up with Teller and went into a lot of the anti-gravity and a lot of things. He talked about time travel to me on the phone, before the Internet was going very, very well. I used to call him on the telephone, and it cost me because I'd talk long distance to Australia with him, and he would talk about things. And so he was involved in a lot of projects people never knew about and may never know about. But, there was a lot of, when, like you said, whenever they even talk about something coming out, some kind of new technology or something, just like Velcro, or the new wiring, that they've got now. And, we've had it 50 or 100 years almost, and people don't realize that nothing's really new. They've had it a long time. We just didn't know it.
Yeah, the day after Roswell, the book, Colonel Philip J. Corso, you remember him, he said almost all of the stuff we have now, the laser technology, a lot of the computerization of things all came from backwards engineered. So they were grabbing these so-called alien craft, backwards engineering them, and that brings us to Bob Lazar, who everybody, well, not everybody, but an awful lot of people thought he was nuts and crazy and an idiot. And I believe everything that he said. He said later on an interview, I watched him, he said he was very sorry he ever mentioned it. But he thought that the American people should know about it. But evidently they didn't want to know about it. And so he paid dearly for revealing what he revealed. And
well, you talk about some... Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to say, you talk about, and you was on the Art Bell show, you talk about somebody that paid dearly. You remember when Art Bell was giving these guys a way to talk, John Lear and all these people were talking through his show, basically. And you remember the troubles he started having, the troubles he had with his son, and his wife was mysteriously died, and they were claiming that, he killed her. And, I mean, Art Bell went through a living hell. But he was the biggest expose on the planet, probably, on the airwaves of a lot of this secret project stuff that the whistleblowers were talking through. And of course, Malachi Martin was, about the time Malachi Martin had his untimely death, that was the Art Bell shows that he was on and trying to reveal these things. So here we are, and Art paid a great price. He never got back either, Stewart. He never was able to come back, and I was so shocked that time that John Lear literally asked Art about your Project Red Star, and Art said, sure, but we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and, of course, he started his after midnight or whatever it was, his latest attempt to get back on, and he claimed people were shooting at him. And so he went to the family, and they just decided to quit.
Yeah.
So he got the message, and I can remember when I was on with him, boy, that was way long ago, and we were doing a show on, all kinds of things, UFOs, planetary changes, et cetera, but we got onto the New World Order, and he made the comment that, that it was coming, and there wasn't going to be any freedoms in it. Mm-hmm. And I caught tons of flack from the Christian community for daring ever to go on the Art Bell show. Don't you know the guy's a Mason? Don't you know he's this? Don't you know he's that? And I thought Paul went up to Mars Hill and witnessed to the New Agers of his day.
That's true.
But maybe Paul shouldn't have done that either. So what do? No matter what you do, no matter where you go, they got to shoot you down. And you're right. I mean, I paid dearly for being on that show as well. It's just one of those things. And the powers that be run this thing, and they give you some warnings, I guess, particularly for art. We got rid of you once. We don't want you back. And so they take care of it.
That's right.
And they usually do use family or threats to family or whatnot. I can remember when I released Iron Mountain Blueprint for Tyranny, and that was how many years ago now? And NBC News, CBS News, ABC, and all that were calling up to interview, and I wouldn't interview with any of them. But I did talk to a guy from NBC's Dateline. Come to find out, I don't think the name that I was given was the correct one. But anyway, we talked for about an hour, and they were going to come out and do a Dateline on Iron Mountain Blueprint. Well, they never showed up. They made the appointment, and I had a whole bunch of friends come out. We cleaned the place up, and they never showed, never called, never canceled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was during that time in the Clinton years, when we had the black helicopters that didn't exist hovering over the house and the studio. We had a mass, I think there were like 4 or 5 helicopters dive bombing and throwing out balloons just across the road from us.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff like that was going on. And then one time I was in the house, and not in the house, but in the studio, and the Holy Spirit said, go outside and take a look. I did. I went outside and I took a look, and there were 4 guys in a black SUV with high-powered rifles and scopes. And there was no hunting season at all there. In fact, where I live at that time, there was no high-powered rifles allowed in that area. Yeah. Well, they saw me, and they turned around, got back in the SUV, and drove down the road, and the Spirit said, follow them, which I did. They were getting out to go on the back side of the property. And I got the real distinct impression that they were there to take me out. And one of the guys that I saw, made eye contact with, I think was one of the guys that went out to Idaho and was killed out there at the Randy Weaver. You know, that was during those Clinton years when they were putting people away that they didn't like.
I remember that.
And it's just they play hardball. They really do.
Yeah.
I've often wondered why they're so intent, because the Bible says not one person's going to be saved that was not written in the book, and not one person who is lost or is going to be lost is ever going to be written. So how can they be changing anything by all of this stuff that they're so afraid people to hear? In other words, it doesn't alter the final outcome. They can't outsmart God.
That's
Go
what's
ahead.
so interesting, Stuart. I was just going to mention the fact, we had a radio show, you and I in Augusto some time ago, and what you're talking about now, that don't they realize they cannot change things? And, you mentioned where you thought they may possibly even try to use time travel to change events. And
yes.
I have to agree with you. I've studied that. I've looked into things and activities that are going on, and I think you're right. I think that they're so deceived. They don't believe what the Word says. They don't believe that there is a Creator that literally has this laid out in pretty much something called time-space continuum, and viewing it from all ends, from the past, from now, and the future, all at the same time, and we're just locked into this. We're locked into a time machine, I guess, where we have 24 hours a day. But I think you're right. I think they will even literally try, and it may be through the CERN or colliders, the LHC and all of that, to literally manipulate somehow time to change matters. They don't want it to come out the way that the Bible says it will.
Well, of course, if you were in that mindset, I suppose, they've got two choices. They can go back and attempt to change it. I mean, if they could go back and eliminate Mary, for example, then they've eliminated Jesus Christ. But, of course, they probably would not have realized that God would have known that and set up something different. So you can't win. It's kind of like the cup saying to its maker, how did you make me thus? I mean, I don't like it. So they can't win, but they think they can. Yeah. And I'm convinced they think they can. And they got that choice, go back and alter it, which is showing up in the movies like the TV series on Stargate, where at the time when they went back to try and alter things. Back to the Future, the movie where they went back. Remember Doc and Marty? Oh, yeah. And, I mean, it's in the movies, and it was prevalent. And that was a time when they were all pointing at 9/23, and, of course, that sailed by, and everybody thought, well, the Earth didn't blow up. We didn't have major earthquakes. No volcanoes took off, so absolutely nothing happened. But the handshake of the Pope with Obama at 9:23 in the morning, Washington time, was an extremely important spiritual event. And I think we're beginning to see that now with the UN coming up with all of this stuff on surveillance. Did you see that, where the UN wants all this surveillance data now?
I saw that. But, this is interesting, Stuart. We're watching some really strange events. Like, I'm still seeing data in the background that Obama is really looking to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, by the end, of his term. And this is, if he was going to want that, then would he not desire the UN be over all the surveillance over the world?
Exactly. And why are they wanting it now? I mean, articles are showing up about this, folks, where the UN wants total data on everybody. So, I mean, how long have we been talking about this global government, global religion, global economic system, global political system to the people and warning them it was coming? How many years have we been doing that, Larry? 25, 30 years now?
Oh, my Lord.
Here it is.
Oh, my. A long, long time.
And it's like that. Nobody pays any attention. Nobody listens.
That's very true.
Anyway.
Well, it's like, Stuart, it's almost like our audience has even shrunk during the last few years. I mean, literally, It
has. It has. In fact, a lot of the ministries out there are in trouble financially anyway. But the ones that are really zeroing in on the real truth are in a lot of trouble financially. And it seems like it's almost as though the Lord is beginning to fulfill the prophecies that there will be a famine in the land for the Word of God, and they will run from coast to coast, and they won't be able to find it.
That's
there
right.
will be no truth left. And it's the people's fault because their priorities are so messed up that they just will not support the truth and don't want to hear it. And you're right, that group is shrinking, which I guess proves out the many and the few and the so-called remnant. If you've got a remnant, you've got only a few people at the end who are really, how do I say, after the Lord, hot, on fire, and the rest of them are lukewarm. And people better really read the book of Revelation because it's coming true. And what do you say to them? Anyway, I don't.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jared. I used to have the concept when I began reading the Bible years and years ago. I'd read in Genesis, and I'd read about the most incredible small number I could even imagine from a very large, probably, group of people that survived. And in Genesis, it was 8. After the deluge, 8, only 8. And I thought, that is so incredibly small, that don't even make sense. I mean, but you know what? Towards the end, we're going now, small numbers tied into the word remnant are bringing me to a new sense of what God's numbers mean.
Yes. And it's a shame. It really is, because I've always thought that if you're going to be a Christian, you have to have such an open mind and an open heart, because what the Lord shows people who really read it, they think it's all about a religion. I've taken a whole different approach to the Bible. That book can answer any question anyone has at any time if they would just open it up and read it. Not even from a religious point of view, but just from an informational point of view. My Lord, it's got ghosts, it's got all kinds of weird UFOs. Everything is in there. You just got to know how to read it. And Daniel and the book of Revelation are coming true. And I mean, how do people answer that? 2,500 years ago, Daniel is telling us about the UN. Here it is.
That's right.
It's weird. Anyway, I want to get back a little bit to this arrival that's coming and your experience with that and the children, because we are coming up on what the Bible calls is a strong delusion, and I've always pegged that, and maybe wrongfully so, to the concept of evolution versus creation. That if, in fact, we are evolving, we're going to evolve upwards and finally meet the gods who brought us here. If you go into Native American history, I've got a book right here in front of me, Star Ancestors.
Oh, yes.
Indian wisdom keepers share the teachings of the extraterrestials. So we have the star people, the star nation people, as an arrival. Now, no matter where you go around the globe, these stories all end about the same way. They are going to return. So here we are in an arrival. Now, the Bible is one of the few books that talks about a delusion. In fact, as far as I know, it's the only one that really talks about a delusion, a very effectual delusion in which the people of the world are going to be deceived into thinking that these really are aliens and extraterrestrials, when in reality, they're most likely fallen angels set here to deceive. In your vision of the children, did you get the inference that that was godly or of the occult?
No, this is what's interesting, Stuart, and this is really an interesting concept, and I've thought about this since I had that experience. You know, a lot of times, and I'm not telling anybody that I'm telling these movies to mean anything, but I'm just saying this is a concept that's interesting. You know, the enemy, he always counterfeits something godly. In other words, whatever the Creator has created, the enemy can't make anything. He can't create anything, so he has to twist and turn and create a, you know, he doesn't create it, but he uses the concept of the Lord and tries to deceive people to believe that he created it, which he didn't actually. He's just using what's already there. And so this is what's interesting. You remember in the movie Knowing, the children, the interesting part of that was that the children had to volunteer to go. In other words, they wasn't taken like the movie Taken. They literally had to volunteer. They had to give their permission or their will over to these entities in the supposed Ezekiel's wheel in that movie to go. And now in my arrival experience that I saw, that all the children were being forcibly lined up by the police and military and marched. They were walking into these large craft, and they were all being taken. Basically, it wasn't with their permission. This was without their permission that this was happening. And so this is probably part of the deception. You know, that's what I found so interesting is in the movie Knowing, there was a will concept there. The child had to really say, okay, I want to go. In other words, they wouldn't make them go. They just gave them the opportunity. But in the arrival, you know, whatever beings were in these craft, they were literally taking these children, like the movie Taken in a way, you know, like that. So there was no volunteerism. It was literally, you're going. I mean, they were loaded, and then the parents were all loaded into trucks and hauled off, and I don't know where they went, probably some kind of camps, I would assume, because the adults did not go into the craft. Huh?
Yeah. A re-education FEMA camp.
Oh, at least that, yeah.
Probably a termination camp. I would guess. I wanted to read just a little short clip here from No Eyes, Phoenix Racing. Now, No Eyes was Cherokee, I think, if I remember right. But she talks about people's going to see stuff they believe before. People's going to see new beings. Beings going to come more, much more. They come from there. She points to the sky. Beings going to show more and more. They no gonna hide, play games. It is time they show they be really here all along. Now, we've talked about the disclosure. She claims there isn't going to be one by any government. Have you heard any more from Dr. Greer at all on the Disclosure Project? I think he's kind of drifted off into contact more than he is on disclosures at this point.
Yeah, but I haven't heard much more about what he's doing. I know there is still a project ongoing, but you remember all the meetings they had with high officials and even generals? It went nowhere, literally nowhere. And interestingly, to go along with what No Eyes said, and I've read her book, it's kind of you know, what's interesting is almost everything she said in there, even though she's Antichrist to the core, basically, and admits it, you know, a lot of this is true. It's truth. What she said has proven out. Yeah.
Yeah, the accuracy of her prophecies is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's...
And Standeo has agreed, you know, since then. Standeo has come out, and he said that he does not believe there will ever be a true disclosure, that we may get you know, some type of false flag event or whatever, you know, to get your eyes on something else, but he said we're never going to be really told the truth, and he believes that the so-called extraterrestrials, fallen angels, whatever you want to believe, when they come, the arrival, that they're going to literally reveal themselves, actually.
Yeah, that's what she says. And then she says something that's very interesting to the Christians out there. She says, it'd be good when peoples believe because they're going to see with own eyes. They're going to have to believe. It not be good when people's going to question state about stuff state already know about for a long time. They're going to be plenty angry at state. They're going to want to know why state hides stuff from people. She's talking about hiding all this alien contact and alien intermixing here. This going to make people's no trust state. Then she says people's going to question church now. How about what church say about spirits? How about what church say about first man, first woman? Some are that no stand up now. People's going to be much angry at church too, even. So there's your answer as to who they are.
Yeah.
It's here to destroy the biblical version of creation.
That's right. You're exactly
right.
right.
She comes,
I think your
right
interpretation
out and says it. Yeah, go ahead.
I think your interpretation is really correct, Stewart. Matter of fact, what's so interesting is there in the last few years, I know you've seen some of this, there's been some new Mayan or what appeared to be Mayan digs that they've dug up gold that has like flying saucers and craft and almost like spacemen and things embedded on this gold and what was made, and whether it's Mayan, I don't know, but it was dug up, a lot of it in Ecuador, actually. And this is one of the concerns because on the side burner there, we've always got the Blue Beam project that's ongoing. And I contacted Klaus when this first came out because they were reporting, they had dug up something in Ecuador that showed some type of like sky people or star people or beings from outer space, so to speak. I mean, that's what it appeared on these artifacts. And I talked to Klaus, and Klaus said no, because I was concerned that, there's always been some reports, too, that they were going to fake some of this stuff, that they were going to literally bury some stuff that's fake and dig it up and then claim, New World and all this kind of thing and their cult. And, but I asked Klaus, and he said that what was dug up in Ecuador is real. It's not fake. It's not. Nobody sat down and made this stuff. He said this is real artifacts from the past, and he said that's why he continually says the more you dig up, the more questions you have and not answers.
So, in other words, the ancient past is so far removed from what we're being taught in our grade schools, high schools, and universities that the two could never meet.
That's right.
Yeah, well, how do you re-educate a people that don't want to hear any of that? You remember, who was that guy from Boston? Boston University. He went over to the Sphinx and the pyramids, but predominantly on the Sphinx, and he was saying, hey, guys, wait a minute. That's water erosion. That's not wind erosion. It's water erosion. And he all but lost his job, even though he could prove it. That's right. You're right. I can't remember his name, but you see him on TV every once in a while now. But this is how scientists, evidently, they get so ingrained that even though you can show them proof after proof after proof, they just cannot and will not accept it and would rather go down in flames than admit that maybe they were wrong. So I don't know. Say, did you see this thing? I think you did because I think you're one of the ones who sent it to me. Temple of Baal will be erected in Times Square?
Absolutely. And, I've looked into this, and Tom Horn and Sharon Gilbert, you're familiar with Sharon.
Yes.
They're the ones that are warning it's a replica of the ancient Temple of Baal. It's actually it's the Temple of Baal in the Syrian town of Palmyra. That's where a lot of fighting is going on right now. But they're going to, from what I've read, and they say it's not a joke, and this was on the Sid Roth show too, they're going to actually construct an ancient Temple of Baal, 2 locations. One is in New York City's Times Square, believe it or not, and the other one is in London. We're looking at, and this is something that Tom Horn had mentioned recently. Of course, you and I talked about portals quite a while before he did, but he's even suggesting now, are these being built to actually open a wormhole or a portal inside this new temple that they're building to Baal in those 2 locations?
Well, it's kind of interesting that they've picked the great city Babylon to do this with.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming right out into the open with all this stuff. But I have you heard of anybody, how do I say, protesting?
No, no opposition.
No opposition to it at all. Well, it's kind of like. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there's no opposition, and it's almost like people don't even believe it anyway, so there's no challenge. I mean, they don't believe in it. If they do believe it, they don't care. You know, Stewart, I've never seen apathy in a people like in our nation now. They don't care. You know, they just don't seem to care anymore.
Well, it's kind of like the sign of Purim when we had the blood red moon.
Mm-hmm.
Purim was, they said anyway, that the Feast of Purim was the last time that they had a blood red moon on that date was 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, I saw your article today. I saw your article on Lightgate Blogger, and that was really, really good. I mean, I would tell people that you know, go to the Lightgate Blogger and read that article because it was rather telling, and you had some good photographic information there too.
Oh, it's amazing. You know, breaking up is hard to do, or is it? If you got an easy button, it's real easy, I guess. And I think the Lord's got a great big easy button. Probably bought it from who sells those? Office Max or somebody like that. Office Depot, I think. You know, have those easy buttons. I think the Lord's got a great big one up there. I remember you telling me one time that He had shown you that when the United States is broken in two parts, it was kind of a snap. It was really quite sudden. Did I remember right?
Oh, you did. It was almost. It was. I was shown the United States, and then all of a sudden it happened so fast. It was like it broke in half, and it was like I heard a. Have you ever had a dry twig and just snapped it right quick, and it snapped in two with a big snap sound?
Yes.
I heard that snap sound, and it was suddenly. And this nation was broke in two, and that's been a long time ago, Stewart. You remember well, you know, but I'll never forget the snap, that sound of the U.S. breaking in two. Now, I can't say that when it happens that it'll be that quick. There may be some precursor events or whatever, you know, I don't know. I didn't see those. I just saw, but I do think, Stewart, and I noted too in your article today, you talked about tying some of this in with the dividing of Jerusalem and Israel, and do you know that seems to be where we're headed, and that may literally be an event that causes the breaking of America.
Yeah, there was, I think it was a young boy or a young girl or more than one maybe, that had a vision, a dream vision, and he went out to tell his mom that he'd had this vision, or the Lord had told him that if Israel is divided into two parts, that God was going to divide the United States into two parts. And what was amazing to me is if you look at the Navy map that I posted there, and then you look at the Mid-Continent Rift and how it ties right in to the New Madrid, and what's happening down there in your neck of the woods with all those earthquakes, I mean, it's not far-fetched at all that those two faults just suddenly break. Now, I know when Red Elk was here, he said that the plates underneath the North American plate, and Sorcher-Fall ran a series of articles from Russian scientists about the instability of the North American plate and that it was fracturing down below. And I think it was Ed Dames on his latest show said that he believes that all the noises and the kind of screeching metal on rock sounds are actually from this breaking up of the North American plate, deep, deep, deep. And it's rebounding off the atmosphere. So it sounds like it's coming from above, when in reality it's actually coming from way below ground. Yeah. And those sounds come and go. And, of course, a lot of people have wondered what they were. And I've often wondered if they aren't tied to Project Bluebeam and, you know, they're practicing to make sure that when they run. Go ahead.
I just going to say that Stan Deyo, another thing he also said was the fact that when we were hearing some booms in our area here in Oklahoma, you know, I talked to Stan, and he said a lot of times that deep movement, he said really, really deep movement in the earth would project a sound that would travel up through the ground, and you know, it's almost like it enters the atmosphere because you hear it like it's coming from above, but it's really not. It's coming from below. And he also said that magma movement deep underground would cause really strange vibrations and sounds. And so, you know, I think really under our country we're having movement that really may be setting this nation up for what God already sees is going to happen. And when it's time, all the little fractures will be in place, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep, exactly. And I noticed you were mentioning how there in Oklahoma they're trying to blame it on this fracking, but you know there's unrest that's not really being reported. We've had some strange vibrations right here in the Menominee area, and they're very minor. But they're telling. There was a lady over in Eau Claire, in fact, it was written up in the Eau Claire paper, of plasma balls coming up out of the ground and floating around. That's indicative of deep underground release of energies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we had that in Arkansas and Missouri the last few years. I've seen reports of the same thing, and of course, people don't know it. Close to me up here, over in the edge of Arkansas, in the I can't remember 1900-something or other, I believe it was. There's a place called Huntington where there was literally a volcano erupted, and people just simply don't know it. They don't know these things, you know.
Wow. Well, you were fooling around over there in Heavener for a while, investigating a lot of the stuff over there. And those were kind of ancient artifacts, too. And, you know, getting back into being hit with something or being smashed to the ground, you related a story about somebody you knew, and he wanted to go up there and into that area, and you warned him not to do it, and he did it anyway and got beaten up pretty bad by an invisible entity.
Yeah, that was a guy from Louisiana by the name of Harold Klaus, and of course Harold's passed away now, and he died of cancer. I had met him, and really, really great guy. But he came up because of some reports he heard me talking about on radio, and I believe it was on our shows that we had done the conversations or whatever that we were doing at the time. He came up to Heavener, and I knew he was coming. I warned him about Heavener and some entities in that region. And he went there, and he said something that was invisible attacked him. It throwed him to the ground. Now the reason I'm explaining this to people is I met him after this attack at a McDonald's in Mena, Arkansas, and he shared all this with me in person. So this is not something I heard. This is what the man told me himself. He claimed that something grabbed him and throwed him literally to the ground and beat him. And not only that, Stewart, he said it scared him to death. He got in his vehicle and he left, and he said something kept following him. It followed him all the way from Heavener over into Arkansas, and he stayed all night in his truck on the side of the road. He just went over and parked, and he said something, it was like it was watching him. And, you know, people, Stewart, they don't realize when we talk about entities, when we talk about demons, when we talk about, I know people don't take us serious sometimes when we talk about the Prince of Persia in the Bible. They don't realize really what you're dealing with. But, you know, principalities and powers, you know, and things like that, it's really serious. And he got beat up. I mean, literally beat up. And but he was also the one, you remember the guy that I talked about from Louisiana that had told me about the incredible dream he had of the people in America that were going from state to state, just hunting somewhere to stay, somewhere to live. They were refugees all over this country, and it was American people that were the refugees. Now, he said he wasn't shown whether it was like something happened on the West Coast and all of these people were fleeing, but it said it reminded him, you remember what the old Oklahoma, sandstorms and droughts where a lot of the people just loaded, well, remember that movie Grapes of Wrath? They loaded everything they had in their vehicles, and they started out for California in those days. And he said it was like that, and people were everywhere hunting somewhere just to spend the night. And that was Harold Klaus, and he's passed away now, and super good guy, really, really a good guy, and loved the Lord. And he was actually a parole officer, so, he's somebody that I'd listen to that could tell me a tale. And when he related the Huebner event, I believed him.
Well, yeah, particularly because you'd already kind of warned him he better be careful. Because you had been up there a number of times. I remember you were talking about that. So yeah, but it's just you're right. People just don't. If they can't see it, they don't believe it. We produced a 16-hour course. It's called Angel Fall, and it's about dealing with demons. And in that course, there are almost 4 hours of tape recordings of these demons speaking through their victims. And if you listen carefully to it, you learn how they operate. You learn how nasty and evil they are, and you also learn how powerful they are.
Yeah.
And yet, for whatever reason, people just don't believe it. Well, if you go on YouTube, you see all of these weird things that these night cameras are picking up, and I'm quite sure that a lot of them are probably doctored, but a lot of them are not.
That's right.
It is coming out into the open, just as the Lord said. You're going to see some very strange things happening. And I think you and I often wondered in some of the older programs, what are people going to do when they open a door and there's an alien gray sitting there looking at them?
Well, I'll tell you what, Stuart, what's interesting, too, and this fits into what we're talking about, is the biblical thinning of the veil. The veil literally is thinning, and Tom Horn's done some work on that, and you and I have talked about that a long time, and you remember the tale I told you about the people, and, they're friends of yours that live the other side of me over here, that there's a place on their property they can walk to, and you can literally hear other people. You can't see them, but you can hear other people and conversations, and it's like, matter of fact, I believe it was a Twilight Zone one time had a movie where, there was like a veil there, and somebody stepped through it and it was on the wrong side, and that showed them in another town that on their side didn't even exist, and there were people living there and talking and sharing, but you know the couple I'm talking about, and they're good people, and they can literally stand on one side of their property and hear something just over there, wherever over there is, whether it's a portal, whether it's a dimension doorway, whatever it is, and they're people. There's something there that they can hear, but they cannot ever see it. They never see it.
Yeah, I've had that experience myself. I heard music. I was outside. I don't remember what I was doing, but I remember hearing music. And so I went out towards the field where it was coming from, and I could walk almost over to it, but there was nothing there. Now, I don't know if it's some strange atmospheric phenomenon where it's acting as an antenna or something and you're just picking up a radio wave, or whether you're actually listening to another dimension. I guess one would, my dad ran into that when he went into this town that they later found didn't even exist. And I'll never forget when he said it really scared him, and he wasn't afraid of a lot of things. He was a very inventive, creative guy, and he was not afraid of hardly anything, and that really spooked him. The town was definitely alive and real, and they were down in there and driving around. They couldn't figure out what town it was. They finally got out of there because he got scared, and when they went back to try and find it, wasn't there. There was an old logging town or whatever you might want to call it, but that was about it. So did he jump across time zones? There's a story about this party with this little boy disappeared, and they could hear him calling for his mother.
Mm-hmm.
He vanished in front of a whole bunch of people, and they never did find him. And you may remember the lady who was, I think, flying over the Bahamas. And remember? And she said, I can't see the airport. And they said, you're flying right over it, the control tower. Could they actually see her?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no, there's nothing here. It's just all woods. There's no airport. And they said, you are right over it. Turn around and you'll see it. She said, no, there's nothing here. Absolutely nothing here. And she went off and they never found her. And then you may remember the story of the Eastern, I think it was an Eastern Airlines DC-8 that lost 8 minutes of time.
Yeah.
And they never found out what happened. So our knowledge of this universe is about zero. Maybe the rich know what's going on, but I don't know. It's just so strange. Did you see this article that the moon used to spin on a different axis?
I saw that, and wasn't that from ice buildup or something on the moon? And then, it makes me wonder if the Cobra, or we're talking about the destroyer, which I saw a photo of Nibiru or whatever, you had on your new article, and I tell everybody they need to go read that article closely. I wonder almost if the passing by of the destroyer once before, about the time of the deluge, actually moved the moon. And they talk about the tilt of the Earth changed, too, about that time. And so, a lot of times I wonder, because biblically, I believe it's in Isaiah, it talks about the moon not keeping its course. And we know biblically everything's going to be okay according to Isaiah until the moon doesn't keep its course, and then we're in trouble, really, really bad trouble. And I think we're beginning to be in the time frame we could really be in bad trouble.
Well, I was wondering, these two comets that passed by, these two green comets, if they are not part of the entourage. And we're getting more and more of these sightings of meteorites flashing over these different areas. So is this all part of this arrival of the, the Nibiru and the rest of it? Have you heard any more about it?
Well, I've watched some of the Torah codes. They haven't run. If they've ran them, they're keeping them pretty secret, pretty tight right now. But they did. I told you, Glazerson and I believe Harlech found the term. They ran it in Nibiru. Of course, when they run Nibiru, Nibiru, they have to literally put it into the Hebrew, run it in the Torah code in the Hebrew, and then translate it back into. And the translation came back. It was spelled a little different, but it talked about Nibiru, and it called it. The Torah code calls it a star, is what it calls it. Which really, literally, if it is the other sun, the twin of our sun in the binary universe, the binary star system, that would make it accurate. Even if it's a brown dwarf star, it would still make the Torah code accurate. So we really, what's interesting, Stuart, is I know a lot of people, it's so easy for them to just say, oh, that's baloney, and turn it off. But you know what? There's kernels of truth that we just don't know how to research. Like you said, what mankind really knows is about zero, about everything around us, and we don't understand that. And so if we have a little difficulty, and I found, Stuart, that people are so lazy, they won't research it. A matter of fact, I have people still occasionally, they want to read my blog or something, they'll click on it, and if it don't come up right away, in other words, they're having trouble with their computer, they want to email me about how to fix their end. And I'm thinking, I'm not there. I'm not even around your computer. you're kidding, right? Because I can't even fix my own hardly, you know? And
Well, they
so
want
people are so lazy. They're so lazy they won't research. You know, you found this, Stuart. How many people really research the data that we even share on a radio show?
Very few, if any. I'm sure there are some out there that are, Koreans that will actually challenge you, which is what they should do. You know, if you're going to produce something, the people really, according to the Bible anyway, should challenge it. Is this true? Look it up for themselves. But see what's happened. I think the apostasy is here in full force. And the only thing that's not here yet is when this thing gets down to the wire and your life depends on whether you testify or don't testify about the Lord, because that's rapidly coming. I mean, this business of Antichrist spirit, and you've mentioned that I don't know how many times among the police, that there seems to be a spirit rising. It's not even a rational spirit. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it is a spirit, Stuart, and Darnett mentioned to me the other day, we were watching a movie about something, and, you know, we had watched something with Denzel Washington a few years ago. There was an invisible spirit that was in this, you know, Denzel Washington was a police investigator, and he began to find people killed, and it somehow linked into some type of religious order, he thought, and he was researching that. And it was a spirit it moved on touch. In other words, if the person that spirit was in touched somebody else, even an animal, it would go into that and hide. And it was so deceptive because the more he searched for this spiritual killer, it kept changing, it moving from one person to another. He could never catch it. And that reminded me so much of how these demonic spirits do. You know, they can ride on somebody. They can influence somebody. You know, of course, now we find, and Uri Geller, you remember Uri Geller of Israel, the psychic? You know, they tried to, he said that they tried to actually bring him in to remote, as an actual assassin, a remote assassin, and have him kill people, you know, remotely. And he wouldn't do it. He refused to do it. He stayed in trouble all the time because of that. But, you know, he was the guy that bent spoons and all this other kind of stuff. But so that just shows you that they're into these things. And so whether people can be killed by a remote, influencing, as they call it now, or, you know, a demonic spirit moving through someone else, or a demonic spirit literally taking over somebody and using them, all the above is available today. This can happen anywhere around us today. And Darnett was talking about ISIS, and she said, these people are literally, she said, this is a demonic spirit ruling all of these. These people this is being done by spirits. And, of course, when we talk about ISIS, it's hard to talk about ISIS without what they talk about as being their religion called Islam. But, you know, within Islam, and you never hear them talking about it, there's something called the jinn, Jinn, and people have written books about the jinn. And those are demonic spirits, and they're scared to death of them. They do exist, and even the Quran talks about the jinn. You know, it's a world out there we never really think about, and it's around us all the time.
Well, it makes you wonder because, you know, people love horror flicks, right? I mean, most people do. I hate them myself. I don't like them. But, you know, life's spooky enough without going to those things. But it makes you know, it's why, if they love horror flicks and paranormal type flicks, do they turn their mind off at the reality of it? That's always been a question of mine. Why do they do that? Is it because you can go to a movie and say, well, it's just a movie? I don't have to, I don't have to put up with that.
Yeah, I think, Stuart, what it is there's a safety in not believing. In other words, if you go to a movie and it's really just scares the dickens out of you, when you come out of the movie's over. So you can walk down the street and think, that's just a movie, that's fiction, I don't need to be scared. Now, you may go home and, matter of fact, one of the movies that really bothered me, and I shouldn't have watched it, but I did years ago, and a lot of people had real problems, is The Exorcist, you know, the original Exorcist, you know?
Yes.
And what's interesting, people don't realize one of the real men in The Exorcist itself, the event that happened was Malachi Martin. You know, people don't know that. You know, he was involved in that before it became the movie. And but that was one that a lot of people, when it came out, I was a young guy. I went and watched it, and I went home, and I had to try to go to sleep under the covers with my little Boy Scout flashlight on. It scared the dickens out of me.
Yeah, it was like the movie The Thing. I remember my dad took me down to see The Thing, and that night I had a nightmare that it had come into my bedroom and was coming to get me. And I guess I must have screamed bloody murder, because I remember my mother coming in and, holding me and telling me that everything was all right. But there's coming a time when Mama's not going to be able to hold anybody and tell them it's all right, because things are going to go south. And I guess what the sad part is that this is all, I think, basically more on the part of the American people than it is the American leaders. I mean, we can scream bloody murder about Obama and Hillary Clinton and all the rest of these guys and gals, but we're allowing them to continue. We don't see anything that they should be removed from office. Same goes for the Supreme Court, right?
I think, Stuart, that the Americans themselves, even though they're like to say, well, that's Obama. That's, you can remember back at some of these attorney generals that were, so corrupted and that literally came against the American people, and the American people ignored it. The American people have become enablers of this evil, and we can't deny that. Look at abortion, how we enable it by being quiet. Matter of fact, today, Stuart, if you speak of abortion, you are so politically incorrect, they hate you. You don't belong anymore.
I know. Everything is. Well, how many scientists have we aborted? How many people that could save the country have we aborted? How many medical doctors have we aborted? How many university professors have we aborted? I mean, people don't look at it. I had a friend of mine, his name was John Berger. His brother was a Supreme Court Justice, Warren Berger. And I knew John quite well. We went hunting a lot together and whatnot. And he had this saying, and I've always kind of laughed at it. He said, well, he was a Roman Catholic too. He said, I'm all in favor of abortions as long as we can make it retroactive. And I know what he was saying, let's get rid of some of these people who are all in favor of it. I mean, to me, the Bible is very, very clear, and of course people hate the Bible, so they're going to hate this. But the Bible is very clear, I think, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made from the instant of conception.
Yeah.
And that's murder.
Well, who was this comic, this comedian that was so funny? He actually dreamed about making his own heaven. I can't remember the name of the movie that came out. Do you remember his name? He died last year.
He was a comic?
Yeah, he was a comedian, but he was really funny, and he made that movie about heaven that he created. Remember, his wife had died, and then he goes to try to save her. And
Robin Williams.
That's it, Robin Williams. Now, I didn't follow him, but he said one thing just before he died. He was talking, and boy, this stuck with me because of what you just said. He said that he had been over in Germany and was doing some work over in Germany, and said he was making those remarks, and he said some of the German people told him, said we don't have anybody like you over here. There's nobody like you that can put on a show like this and entertain us. And you know what he told them, Stuart? And this stuck with me. He said, maybe you killed all the funny people.
Yeah. I don't think people think about what they're doing and the ramifications down the road of what they're doing. It's like the Bible says about America, they did not consider their latter end. They didn't consider what they were doing was going to end up, as I put in the blog, breaking up is hard to do.
That's right.
America is under siege, and the Lord usually does operate. Let's get back onto earth changes. What in the world is going on? I mean, you guys down there in Oklahoma, is that a big sinkhole that's developing down there? Is the whole state going to disappear? Well, it's just earthquake after earthquake after earthquake. I watch your blog, and it's nothing but filled with earthquake stuff.
Oh, it's unbelievable. This began, Stuart, it seemed to. Remember we were talking about north of Oklahoma City a few years ago. We began to talk about a rift. We wasn't having this activity until this rift opened up, remember, in this riverbed, and it was spewing methane straight up into the air, And you and I, actually, you put some photos, I think, up on your website way back.
Yes.
And we talked about it on some radio shows, and then we began to have the earthquakes. And, the last few years, they now say, Stuart, that Oklahoma has the greatest frequency of earthquakes, even greater than California. And then, again, I have to fall back on and I know everybody's blaming fracking, but from my understanding, and I know people that are in fracking, and they say that earthquakes that go to the depth of some of these are going is simply not fracking and hadn't got anything to do with it. But I personally, since my experience, you remember of that canyon almost in the middle that went down to Oklahoma and part of Arkansas, and it's almost like, I can't say it's a fact, but it just seems like something is setting up the fracturing of this nation, this whole nation. It's being set up and being readied, and really humanity is not smart enough to know that. They don't put two and when they put two and two together, they're always getting 3 or 5.
Yeah, I know. This is this is that Common Core new math. 2 and 2 always equals something other than 4. It's part of that. It's part of that dumbing down of the American people, and that's another issue. You would think that the parents of these children would be paying a little more attention to what they're being taught. And if they really love their children, you'd think they'd really be up at arms at some of the stuff and the evil that these kids are being taught. But I guess it has to go that way. The rich men have got their plans. They're going to carry them out, even though it's suicidal. But they're going to do it. They're committed. They have to. And unfortunately, a lot of our military people are committed too. But it's not going to work. But I notice on this latest new map highlights earthquake risk zones that I got posted on the blog, that Oklahoma seems to be one of the big areas. Now, if this was just fracking, it wouldn't be there.
That's right.
It's even bigger than the New Madrid.
Yeah, you remember the movies that came out. There was 10.5, and then there was 10.5 Apocalypse. You remember how they had that great divide begin, and it went all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, actually. Yes,
it did. It opened up. But didn't that start in the Dakotas, if I remember right?
Yeah, in the movie. Yeah, in the movie it did. And now, but we don't know. I mean, we know, and matter of fact, they're saying now, I've been reading some recent, apparently, research that USGS and all of them seem to be doing, if they're telling the truth, they seem to be saying that there are really deep fracture points, not only from the New Madrid that may go all the way up, and I saw some of your maps on, and I tell people again, if you haven't read Stuart's latest blog, go read the blog, because you've got some maps there that show New Madrid possibly all the way up into the northeast, and also, some of the USGS are reporting that this can also go, from, the south up through to the west also, like a Y almost. And
and I noticed. Yeah, and if you look at the chart, Oklahoma, I was amazed at what that map actually shows. That Oklahoma is virtually covered with this.
Well, I'll tell you what. Every day here where I live, I can drive through these mountains, and they're not real great mountains. They're tall up to a degree. I'm on the highest one, I guess, close to it. But their rocks are rolling down every night. And you know, you can drive down the road and you can see where they've run off the mountain and down. Some of them are left on the road. Some of them are, you know, we've had some rock slides recently. This is new activity for our area. Before, we never had any instability to where it was doing that. But now, and matter of fact, you know, I told you last year that they were drilling in the middle of the highways up here in the mountains, and I stopped and asked them what they were doing, and they were saying they were checking for movement under the roads. And so, and I have found USGS up here with the forestry people, and that's been a couple of years ago, and they were beginning to put out these stations, I guess they're powered by solar, that can report underground activity. So, you know, they're monitoring this area and on up to Oklahoma, but it's not really that public as much as people would think. They're doing it rather quietly and stealthily, I guess you could say, but their articles are sneaking out, and you've got a lot of the data yourself you found. Yeah,
I mean, it's incredible that the people are not putting all of this stuff together. I guess that's what I tried to do on the blog. If people want it, it's www.lightgateblogger.com. Larry, how do they get in touch with you before we shut this thing off?
Okay, the easiest way is just go to my blog site, and that's at larrywtaylor.org, larrywtaylor.org. And there's an email address there. They can read the blogs, the alerts, the radio flashes. I mean, a lot of stuff comes across there. And I've been recently ill with an emergency health situation, and I am better, Stewart, and thank you for your prayers. And the people that heard you, I am better. And so I'm getting back into the saddle, more or less, I guess you could say, and doing more blog work. And Stewart, have you ever seen so much news? It's just unbelievable coming across all the news wires continually.
Yeah, it's amazing. Before we leave, we should maybe touch on the Middle East and that situation. I noticed Putin's withdrawal. He then issued a warning and said, hey, we can come back in hours if we need to. And he's got all these high-tech helicopters coming in as they're removing their bombers. Have you heard any more? You really watched that area. What's going on over there in Israel?
Well, two things that are going on right now that's really telling, and one of them is not being said. ISIS is incredibly attacking the Egyptian forces, and El-Sisi is asking for assistance to help him fight the ISIS movement in the Egyptian Sinai right now. And it seems ISIS is moving more and more in the Sinai and other regions to get close to the Israeli border. They're working their way that way. They're also working against King Abdullah in Jordan. He's really got major problems, which actually puts them on the, if they cause the instability in Jordan and overthrow Abdullah, they're right there again on the Israeli border. Now, you've got Russia in the mix. Now, Russia, Turkey's in trouble. Turkey's Russia's almost surrounded Turkey. Russia's doing one thing that the worst nightmare for Turkey is a Kurdistan. Russia is backing the Kurds in Syria, and they're granting them an area of territory to take over and call a federal occupation zone of Kurds. And Putin's supporting this. This is really bad. Now, on the other hand, also, in the background, there's a lot of trouble stirring in Turkey, and there's rumors of coup anytime against Erdogan. So you've got all that going on. At the same time, we're looking at, the trouble. This is an absolute, invasion of Europe that's going on, and so this is some of the things I'm finding on the internet and other countries, though, is the fact that they're wondering why, if America, in other words, CIA and those people created ISIS, which, of course we deny, why ISIS, it seems to be an ISIS invasion of Europe with maybe a false flag in Brussels and Paris and all of these other things, which is creating chaos. Now, what do they say? What does the rich man say? Order of chaos or something like that.
Yes.
Order out of chaos. What do you think, Stuart?
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating a chaotic situation, and it'll keep getting worse, and then the people throw up their hand and say, help us, help us, help us, and then they'll come in with their New World Order, and they will definitely help. Probably not in a way that the people want it, but they will, I don't know. I mean, this whole thing, I've often wondered, getting back to the arrival, if the real New World Order isn't what these rich guys are trying to set up, but rather after the arrival. And, like Stan found when he was reinterpreting the languages, not a good thing, as Martha Stewart might say. These guys are going to be really tough and nasty, and nobody's going to like it, which might dovetail into your dream vision of the big spaceships coming in and taking away the kids. Kind of like the movie Knowing, because that's exactly what they did do. And just to close out, do you remember the movie Pelican Brief with Denzel Washington?
Yes.
That was the execution of 2 Supreme Court justices.
That's very telling. That's very telling. Yes. Matter of fact, with this Scalia death, this very, very mysterious Scalia death, unattended death reportedly that had no attendance, no law enforcement called. This is so amazing. Being in law enforcement and a homicide investigator that I was for years, I cannot imagine that they would not look into this. And then I also heard some reports that the black Supreme Court justice, that he had also received a threat. So here we are. I mean, to what you're saying, true, it's happening.
Yeah, and that was the killings of the Supreme Court justices in the Pelican Brief was done to influence a vote about the environment. I thought, when I watched that, I thought, boy, is this a fortune-telling movie?
Wow,
and here we are. And boy, I don't know. I think we're on the verge now, Larry. I think they're getting ready to pull the plug, and we're just going to have to watch and see what happens from now through August, September area. If nothing happens this year, then we're getting to the point where it'll be 2017, which we found out on the Omega Code that 2017 actually is more important, I guess, a year for pivoting changes. But we are we not, into already in the religious calendar 2017?
Sure, we're in a... Absolutely. Yes, we are. And this is what's interesting. I saw on your blog, and I do believe what you said. You said that the rich men are the rulers of the earth are committed. They cannot back out. They cannot back down. And I have to agree totally, Stuart. You're right on.
Yeah, they've got to do it. And unfortunately, they take an awful lot of people down with them. It's just too bad. I mean, I was kind of watching the American Babylon Connection here some time ago, and you break down in tears to watch an entire nation of relatively nice people from an earthly viewpoint going down the tubes and can't be stopped. Well, anyway, thanks a lot. We got about 20 seconds left, and I appreciate you coming on, and we'll keep praying for you and gain strength, and we'll try and get you back on as soon as we can.
Thank you, Stuart. Enjoyed it.
Okay, take care. And good night, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again.